And it's interesting, we've touched on it slightly on the impact already, but the thing I found was extremely high stress levels and growing stress levels every day. And that feeling of responsibility. I was never actually frightened for my own life, but I was always worried about making a decision that caused the death of others. And I had a couple of big decision points to make. And this can be at any level. It doesn't have to be just because I was a commanding officer. If you're a section commander or someone who's been dealing with just a small team or on your own, that decision-making process and responsibility bears heavy and I think adds to your stress.
I'm interested by what you said about this, this increasing level of stress, particularly on decision-making. And I've seen that in a number of my patients. A lot of them got more and more anxious the nearer it was time to go home, almost as if they'd made it for 6 months and they only had 2 weeks left. Yeah. I mean, everybody remembers the story about Olaf Schmidt, the bomb disposal guy who died on the last day before he went home on leave. And that sort of is ironed into everyone's consciousness. So I think not only is it the period of time that you're there, but it's also the chance that you might get out. You know, yeah. Both of us to a certain extent had no return missions. That was the sort of joke in the NAFI, wasn't it? Yeah. Well, you're not coming back from there. But actually when you arrive, you think, actually, I'm not coming back from here. But as you get through it, it becomes more and more likely that you might get out of it, and that becomes stressful in itself.
Yeah, and it's interesting because I remember when R&R period was coming round, we were 3 months, we actually extracted from Basel at the 3-month point. But the R&R cycle was starting to start, and I was not going to go on R&R. Yeah. I just made that decision myself, because if I'd gone home for 10 days, I would not have wanted to go back into the situation I found myself, and and that probably comes back to my fear of failure, and a feeling of invincibility, and that actually this place can't operate without me. Completely rubbish, because no one's indispensable. But you get into that mindset, and also you have a real cohesion with those people with whom you share those experiences, and almost to the exclusion of others.
Yeah, we certainly had a number of people who declined R&R, but also a number of people when they came back wouldn't talk about it to anybody who hadn't been there.
Yeah.
And we might talk a bit about that in the end.
And I found myself having reduced empathy for others, and particularly, sadly, my wife and your partners and loved ones and families and friends who are left behind are just as much part of it as you are. In fact, it's harder for them because they are only imagining what things are going on, and it makes it really difficult. And add that to the guilt I felt of every casualty and the deaths, and what did I do wrong that caused it? Well, to be fair, the person that died with me, it wasn't me that killed him, it was the guy that fired the mortar. But it took me a long time to come round to that. Yeah. And we'll come on to that time in a minute. But we've already discussed it, but the normalisation of extreme violence. We were very well trained to go into Iraq, but we were not prepared for the level of violence that we met.
Yes, and if you read some of the descriptions about Garajda, they talk very much about the sort of level of shelling. We were undercover for most of the day because of snipers, and the shelling was on a similar scale to the Second World War. So, it becomes a constant, but you're not certainly in the modern army you wouldn't expect that. But having said that, wars around the world are still doing that. So some of you will be exposed to it.
So, what were the consequences for us? The first thing that I found was it's very difficult to relate to everyday situations when you come back, because it's just not important. You've been living on your wits and close to death for 6 months, and actually choosing something in a supermarket is not important. And I found that I had a severe lack of empathy for others, and it really affects your relationships, I think.
I mean, going back to the supermarket thing, then because we were besieged, we weren't getting any rations or anything like that, and so we were living off the metal bags of stuff. And I think we had menu E for 3 months. And when I walked into a supermarket and I was so overwhelmed by the different colours and everything that was around me, I went and sat back in my car and burst into tears. So it wasn't that it seemed like a minor decision. It was just overwhelming, and also overwhelming to see that all these people were wandering around as if it was normal. And I felt quite angry towards them. Because I thought, we've been living hell for 6 months, and I come back here and you're all mincing around, you're all overweight, and you're all just eating everything that we haven't been able to eat. So it was a weird experience. And so I think one of the things that when we've chatted before is there is such a mixed bag, a wide bag of various symptoms and things that happen to you when you come back. So if you're feeling something that doesn't feel right, then think about it.